In 678, Constantinople was dying. For 5 straight years, an Arab fleet had been sailing up to the walls of the city every spring, attacking relentlessly, then pulling back to their base at the peninsula of Cyzicus to wait out the winter before doing it all again. The Umayyad Caliphate, under Caliph Muawiyah, wanted Constantinople, and they had the ships, the soldiers, and the patience to take it. The Byzantines were trapped behind their own walls, watching the most dangerous naval force in the Mediterranean return like clockwork every season. They had no answer for it. And then, according to the chronicler Theophanes, a refugee from Syria showed up at the gates of the city carrying a secret that would change the course of warfare for the next 5 centuries. His name was Kallinikos, and what he brought with him was fire that could burn on water. But what Kallinikos actually invented, what it was made of, and how it really worked are questions that have haunted historians, chemists, and military engineers for over 1,000 years. Because the Byzantines guarded this weapon so carefully, so obsessively, that they managed to do something almost no civilization has ever done. They kept a military secret for roughly 500 years, and then they lost it forever. To understand why Greek fire mattered so much, you have to understand what Constantinople was facing in the 7th century. The Byzantine Empire, the eastern half of what had once been Rome, was under siege from every direction. The Arab conquests had already swallowed Syria, Palestine, Egypt, and most of North Africa. Territories that had been Roman for centuries were gone in a generation. Constantinople was the last major prize, and the Umayyad Caliphate was determined to take it. The city itself was nearly impossible to capture by land. The Theodosian walls on the western side were some of the most formidable fortifications ever built. Triple-layered defenses that had held against every army that tried them. The real vulnerability was the water. Constantinople sits on a peninsula surrounded by the Sea of Marmara, the Bosphorus, and the Golden Horn. If an enemy could dominate those waters, they could blockade the city and starve it into submission. And by the early 670s, the Arabs had built exactly the kind of fleet that could do that. That is the world Kallinikos walked into. He was a Greek-speaking architect or engineer from Heliopolis, a city in the Syrian province that had recently fallen to Arab conquest. Theophanes describes him as someone who had escaped his Arab conquerors and made his way to Constantinople specifically to deliver a new weapon to the Byzantines. Some modern scholars think Kallinikos may have refined an existing fire weapon rather than inventing something entirely new, since the Byzantines were already experimenting with fire-carrying ships before he arrived. Theophanes himself mentions Byzantine dromons equipped with fire-carrying tubes as early as 671 or 672, before Kallinikos supposedly arrived. But whatever Kallinikos changed about the formula or the delivery method, the result was something the ancient world had never seen before. Now, incendiary weapons were not new. Armies had been using combinations of sulfur, pitch, and petroleum in warfare since at least the 9th century BC. The Assyrians used fire pots. The Romans had their own fire mixtures. Burning arrows had been around for thousands of years. But all of those older weapons shared the same basic limitation. You could put them out with water. They were fire, and fire dies when you drown it. Greek fire broke that rule entirely. The weapon was a liquid that could be projected at enemy ships under pressure. It stuck to whatever it touched. It burned with a fury that water could not stop. In fact, multiple sources from the period claim that water actually made the flames worse. Sailors who jumped overboard to escape the fire on their ships found the sea itself burning around them. Contemporary writers gave it a dozen different names. They called it sea fire, Roman fire, liquid fire, sticky fire, manufactured fire. The Byzantines themselves just called it the prepared fire, or sometimes the wet fire. The name Greek fire actually came later, used mainly by Western Europeans and the Crusaders, who applied the label to any incendiary weapon they encountered in the East, even ones that had nothing to do with the original Byzantine formula. The only things that could smother it, according to Byzantine sources, were sand, strong vinegar, or urine. And good luck finding enough of any of those in the middle of a naval battle. When the Byzantines deployed Greek fire against the Arab fleet during the siege, The effect was immediate and devastating. Byzantine warships, equipped with bronze tubes at their bows, rowed out to meet the Arab fleet and sprayed streams of liquid fire directly into the enemy ships. Sails caught first, then rigging, then hulls, then the men themselves. The Arab fleet broke and retreated. On their way home, what was left of the fleet ran into a massive storm and lost most of the ships that the fire had not already destroyed. A peace treaty followed. Constantinople had survived, but this was only the first test. The real proof of Greek fire's importance came about 40 years later, and it may be the single most consequential naval engagement of the medieval world. In 717, the Umayyad Caliphate tried again. This was not a seasonal raiding campaign. This was a full-scale invasion. An army of roughly 80,000 men marched overland into Byzantine territory, led by the general Maslama ibn Abd al-Malik. A fleet estimated at 1,800 ships sailed into the Sea of Marmara to blockade the city from the water. The Caliphate was throwing everything it had at Constantinople, convinced that this time the city would fall. Emperor Leo III had prepared. He had strengthened the walls, stockpiled supplies, and ordered any civilian who did not have 3 years' worth of food to leave the city. He knew the siege would be long, and he was ready for it. But his greatest advantage was not the walls or the supplies. It was the weapon that the Arabs had already tasted 4 decades earlier and still had no defense against. The sheer scale of what was coming toward Constantinople is hard to overstate. 1,800 ships, 80,000 soldiers on the ground, with potentially another 80,000 on the ships. This was one of the largest military operations of the entire medieval period. The Arabs had spent years preparing for it, and they had timed it to exploit a period of internal chaos within the Byzantine Empire. A string of coups and counter-coups that had weakened the government. Leo himself had only just seized the throne from the previous emperor, Theodosius III, months before the Arab army arrived. On the 3rd of September, 717, the Arab fleet commander ordered his ships to reposition farther up toward the Golden Horn to blockade the Byzantine sea lanes coming from the Black Sea. As the Arab ships moved north through the narrow waters, the inexperienced sailors lost the wind and their formation fell apart. The ships bunched together in a confused mass right at the entrance to the Golden Horn. Leo saw the opening. He lowered the chain that protected the harbor and sent his fleet charging into the disorganized Arab ships before they could form a battle line. The Byzantine dromons opened up with Greek fire. The result was catastrophic for the Arabs. Ships burned to the waterline. Others were captured as their crews panicked and abandoned them. The surviving Arab vessels pulled back, and the naval blockade was effectively broken before it had even been established. Over the following months, the siege continued by land, but without control of the water, the Arab army could not maintain its supply lines. A brutal winter killed thousands of Arab soldiers. When spring came, an Egyptian fleet of 400 ships sailed in with 50,000 reinforcements. But even these fresh forces could not reverse the situation. Bulgarian allies under Khan Tervel attacked the besieging army from behind, and Arab chroniclers recorded that at least 30,000 Arab soldiers died in the first Bulgarian assault alone. And by August of 718, exactly 1 year after the siege began, Maslama ordered a retreat. The withdrawal turned into a disaster, with Byzantine ships armed with Greek fire harrying the fleeing Arab fleet through the Aegean. Think about what just happened. If Constantinople had fallen in 718, there would have been no major Christian power between the Caliphate and Western Europe. The entire trajectory of European, Middle Eastern, and Central Asian history might have shifted. Some historians have argued that this siege was one of the most consequential military events of the entire medieval period, right alongside the Battle of Tours in 732. And a key reason it did not fall was a weapon that nobody outside the Byzantine court knew how to make. The psychological impact alone was enormous. The 6th century Byzantine historian Theophanes wrote that Greek fire caused enemies to shiver in terror. And that was not an exaggeration. If you are a sailor in the 8th century, and you see fire erupting from the mouth of a bronze dragon at the front of a warship, fire that lands on the water and keeps burning, fire that your shipmates cannot put out, no matter how much seawater they throw on it, you are not thinking about tactics. You are thinking about jumping overboard. And as the Rus would discover 2 centuries later, even the water was not safe. So how did it actually work? The delivery system was just as important as the liquid itself, and it was genuinely impressive engineering for the 7th century. The Droman itself deserves a mention here, because it was not just any ship. These were purpose-built warships, long and narrow, propelled by 2 banks of oars, manned by roughly 200 rowers, with lateen sails for auxiliary power when the wind cooperated. They were fast, agile, and designed specifically for close-quarters combat in the tight waters of the Mediterranean and the straits around Constantinople. A typical crew numbered between 100 and 150 men, and at the front of the ship, mounted beneath the forecastle, sat the weapon that made the Droman the most feared vessel in the medieval world. The heart of the system was a device called a siphon, a bronze tube mounted at the prow. These tubes were often cast in the shape of a lion's mouth or a dragon's head, which was not just decorative. Imagine being a sailor on an approaching enemy galley and seeing a bronze lion head aimed at you from the front of a Byzantine warship. You would not know what it was the first time. You would find out very quickly. Behind the tube sat a sealed bronze reservoir where the liquid mixture was stored and heated, most likely over a brazier built into the deck below. The heat pressurized the liquid inside the tank. When the crew was ready to fire, a force pump, a device the Greeks had known about since antiquity, drove the burning liquid through the tube and out through the animal-shaped nozzle in a roaring jet. Multiple eyewitnesses marveled that the fire could be directed downward or to either side according to the will of the operator. It was, in every meaningful sense, a medieval flamethrower. The men who operated the siphons were specialists called siphonarioi, and they were specifically trained for the job. That training was itself part of the secrecy. The liquid was preheated and pressurized in a cramped, dark space below deck, with no pressure gauges and no safety valves. One mistake, and you would blow up your own ship. The historian Alex Rowland pointed out something remarkable about this. In the entire recorded history of Greek fire, there does not appear to be a single documented case of a Byzantine fire ship accidentally detonating. That suggests an extraordinary level of expertise passed down within a very small group of people. Larger dromons could carry multiple siphons, with additional tubes mounted amidships or at the stern, giving the ship the ability to fire in multiple directions. There were also smaller handheld versions called kerosiphons that worked like early portable flamethrowers and could be used against siege towers and infantry on land. And if the siphon system was not available, Byzantine forces could also hurl clay pots filled with the substance using catapults, or pour it from cranes mounted on the city walls. Greek fire was not a single weapon. It was an entire weapons system. Greek fire was not only used against foreign enemies, the Byzantines turned it on each other during civil wars too. In 727, a revolt by the thematic fleets was crushed partly through the use of Greek fire. Between 821 and 823, during the massive rebellion of Thomas the Slav, the loyalist fleet used it to break the rebel navy. The weapon was too valuable to reserve for outsiders only. If you were fighting the emperor, and the emperor had Greek fire, you were in trouble no matter who you were. And then there were the Rus. In 941, a fleet of Rus warriors, a mix of Scandinavian Vikings and Slavic fighters based around Kiev, launched an attack on Constantinople. Their timing was calculated. The main Byzantine fleet was off fighting the Arabs in the Mediterranean, and the bulk of the imperial army was stationed along the eastern borders. Constantinople looked defenseless. Emperor Romanus I had almost nothing to work with. He scraped together 15 retired warships, fitted them with Greek fire siphons fore and aft, and sent them out to meet the entire Rus fleet. The Rus commander, Igor, had never encountered Greek fire before. He saw 15 old ships and thought he was about to capture them. He ordered his fleet to surround the Byzantine vessels. That was a catastrophic mistake. When the Rus ships closed in, packed tightly together to complete the encirclement, the Byzantines opened fire. The Italian chronicler Liutprand of Cremona recorded what happened next. The Rus warriors, seeing the flames everywhere around them, threw themselves into the water, preferring drowning to burning alive. Some sank immediately, dragged down by the weight of their armor. Others caught fire, even in the water. 15 ships had broken an entire invasion fleet. And here is where the story gets strange, because the Byzantines did not just treat Greek fire as a military advantage, they treated it as something closer to a divine gift. Emperor Constantine VII, who ruled from 913 to 959, wrote a manual of statecraft called De Administrando Imperio. It was a private guide, intended only for his son and heir Romanos II, full of confidential advice about how to run the empire. In that book, Constantine addressed Greek fire directly. He did not credit Kallinikos. He did not credit any human inventor at all. Instead, he wrote that an angel of the Lord had appeared to the great and holy first Christian emperor Constantine and revealed the formula. The weapon was a divine secret, given to Christians alone, for use only in the imperial city. Constantine VII warned his son that any emperor who revealed the formula to a foreign nation would be condemned and cursed by the entire Senate and the Church, and would face divine punishment. This was not just spiritual theater, it was state security wrapped in religious authority. By framing the weapon as a gift from God, the Byzantines made sharing the formula not just treason, but sacrilege. Anyone who leaked the recipe was not just betraying the empire, they were defying heaven itself. The secrecy extended beyond the formula. The Kallinikos family apparently maintained control over Greek fire production through a hereditary guild, passing the knowledge down from generation to generation within a small group loyal to imperial authority. The delivery system, the siphons, and the pressurized tanks required specialized training that could not easily be transferred even if someone captured the hardware. Alex Rowland noted that even if an enemy captured every piece of the weapon system, individual parts were useless without the knowledge to operate them all together. The formula without the siphon was just a flammable liquid. The siphon without the formula was just a bronze tube. The whole system only worked when every piece came together in the hands of people who knew what they were doing. Foreign powers tried desperately to get the secret. The Arabs, who had suffered its effects more than anyone, attempted espionage and interrogated captured Byzantine sailors. The Rus tried twice more after 941. In 1043, the Rus king Yaroslav the Wise sent yet another armada against Constantinople, apparently because a Rus noble had been killed in a brawl with some Byzantine citizens. Emperor Constantine IX warned Yaroslav that this was not a good reason to destroy a profitable trading relationship. Yaroslav sent the fleet anyway. The Byzantines used Greek fire again, and the results were the same. Heavy Rus casualties, ships destroyed, survivors captured, and executed on the beaches. You would think that after 3 encounters with a weapon you cannot stop, you would stop trying. But the allure of Constantinople was that strong. During diplomatic negotiations that followed these defeats, the Rus requested the technology directly. The Byzantines refused, every single time. The closest anyone came to obtaining the formula was in the 10th century, when a renegade Byzantine engineer reportedly gave the Bulgarian Tsar Simeon some information about the weapon. But the Bulgarians never successfully used it, probably because the knowledge was incomplete, or because the practical expertise simply could not be explained in words alone. So what was actually in Greek fire? Nobody knows for certain, and that is not a figure of speech. The recipe genuinely does not exist in any surviving document, but historians and chemists have theories based on the descriptions left behind by people who saw it in action. The base was almost certainly some form of petroleum, likely naphtha, a naturally occurring petroleum distillate. Kallinikos came from Heliopolis in Syria, a region with natural petroleum seeps, which supports the theory that he had access to raw petroleum and understood its properties. Naphtha alone would burn fiercely, but it would not explain all the behavior described in the sources. The most widely discussed additive is quicklime, calcium oxide. When quicklime comes into contact with water, it triggers a violently exothermic chemical reaction, meaning it generates intense heat. This would explain the most terrifying feature of Greek fire, the fact that throwing water on it seemed to make it burn harder. The quicklime would react with the water and generate enough heat to reignite the petroleum vapors, creating the impression that the fire was feeding on the very thing that should have killed it. Sulfur was probably in the mix as well, contributing to the intensity of the flames and the thick, choking smoke that sources describe. Pine resin would have given the liquid its sticky quality, the ability to cling to sails, hulls, rigging, and skin. Some researchers have also suggested animal fats or other organic materials. But here is the problem with every reconstruction attempt. No modern reproduction has matched all the properties described in the primary sources simultaneously. Getting a liquid to burn on water is achievable. Getting it to burn fiercely, stick to surfaces, resist extinguishing, intensify when doused with water, and remain stable enough to pressurize and project through a bronze tube without blowing up the ship, all at the same time, is a chemistry problem that nobody has convincingly solved. Part of the difficulty is that the primary sources were not written by chemists. They were written by chroniclers, soldiers, and diplomats who described what they saw, not what was in the mixture. And they may have exaggerated. When your city has just been saved from annihilation by a fire weapon, you are not going to describe it in measured, scientific terms. You are going to say it burned on water and could not be stopped by anything. The other complication is the delivery system. Even if you got the chemistry exactly right, you would still need to build a pressurized bronze siphon capable of projecting the liquid several meters in a controlled stream from a moving ship without the apparatus exploding from the heat and pressure. Several modern engineers have attempted reconstructions using period-appropriate descriptions of bellows, valves, and bronze nozzles. None of them have fully replicated what the historical accounts describe. The weapon's last clearly documented uses trail off sometime in the 12th century. The historian Anna Komnene, writing in the early 1100s, describes Byzantine forces using fire weapons against Norman and Pisan ships at Rhodes and Dyrrhachium, and she noted how foreign sailors panicked when they encountered fire that could burn downward and sideways. But by this point, the weapon may have already been in decline. When the Knights of the Fourth Crusade arrived at Constantinople in 1203 and 1204, they sacked the city. This was not a battle between Christians and Muslims. This was Christians attacking Christians, Western European crusaders tearing apart the capital of Eastern Christendom. And in the accounts of that siege, there is a striking absence. Some sources mention the Byzantines loading 18 ships with barrels of a flammable liquid and trying to use it against the Crusader fleet from Galata, but the attempt failed. No reliable account describes the kind of devastating, pressurized, water-burning weapon that had saved the city multiple times before. It is possible that the knowledge had already been lost by then. The chain of transmission, the hereditary guild, the specialized training, the closely held formula, all of it depended on a small number of people staying alive and staying loyal across generations. Political chaos, assassinations, civil wars, palace coups, any of these could have severed the chain. And the Byzantine Empire between the 11th and 13th centuries was drowning in exactly those kinds of disruptions. Emperors were blinded, poisoned, overthrown, and replaced at a pace that would make a modern political thriller seem understated. Each transition of power was a moment when the people who knew the secret could have been killed, exiled, or simply forgotten about. And once the chain broke, there was no backup. The Byzantines had guarded the secret so well that there was no written record to fall back on. Think about that for a second. The most valuable military technology in the medieval world, a weapon that had saved their civilization multiple times, and the only record of how to make it was stored inside the heads of a handful of people who were never allowed to write it down. The very thing that had protected the weapon for 500 years is what killed it. The empire limped along for another 2.5 centuries after the Fourth Crusade, but it was never the same. When the Ottoman Turks finally took Constantinople in 1453, they conquered a city that no longer had its most famous weapon. The fire that had burned on water The weapon that had saved Christendom, the secret that emperors claimed came from an angel, was already gone. Nobody had remembered to write it down because nobody was ever supposed to write it down. And so the last great military secret of the ancient world disappeared, not because an enemy stole it, but because the people who owned it protected it so completely that they accidentally protected it out of existence. That is the story of Greek fire. A weapon born out of desperation in a besieged city, delivered by a refugee carrying knowledge from a conquered homeland. It burned on water. It could not be extinguished. It saved Constantinople from the two most dangerous sieges in the city's history, and it terrified everyone who ever faced it. Emperors called it a gift from God and threatened damnation for anyone who shared its formula. And in the end, the secrecy that made it so effective is exactly what destroyed it. The recipe died with the people who carried it, and despite 1,000 years of speculation, no one has been able to bring it back. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, hit subscribe and leave a comment telling us what lost ancient technology you want us to cover next. And if you have not already, drop a like on this video so more people can find it.